And then, one day, the monster had a name. For decades, he was a ghost, a shadow who slipped through windows in the dark. And he was the East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker, later the Golden State Killer. He was a phantom who haunted California from the 1970s into the 80s, leaving a trail of terror, rape, and murder. The police had his DNA, they had crime scenes, they had terrified survivors, but they had no suspect. The trail went cold for 30 years. The case became a monument to frustration, a story people told to scare their kids. Then, in 2018, the police arrested a 72-year-old man named Joseph James D'Angelo, a former cop, a grandfather living a quiet life in a Sacramento suburb. They matched his DNA to the crime scenes. The ghost was finally real. How did they do it? They didn't get a lucky tip. His DNA wasn't in any criminal database. They found him using a new method, something that felt like it was pulled from science fiction. They used forensic genealogy. They took the killer's DNA from an old crime scene and used it to build his family tree. Then, they followed a branch down to him. The news was a bombshell. It felt like a miracle. And it opened up a huge question. If this technique could catch a ghost like the Golden State Killer, could it solve everything? Is forensic genealogy the key to clearing out every cold case file in every police department across the country? It's the biggest leap in crime solving since DNA testing itself. There's no doubt about that. But the answer is not that simple. It's an incredible tool. It's a powerful key. But it doesn't open every door. And it forces us to ask some very hard questions about the secrets we keep and the secrets our DNA might tell without our permission. So, what is this thing really? How does it work? It starts with DNA left at a crime scene. Blood, semen, skin cells under a victim's fingernails. For years, the process was straightforward. You take that DNA profile and run it against a government database called CODIS. This database is filled with DNA profiles from convicted felons and, in some places, people who have been arrested. If you get a hit, you have a suspect. If you don't, you're stuck. The case goes cold. Forensic genealogy offers a new path, a backdoor. Instead of just looking for the criminal, you look for their family. First, investigators send the crime scene DNA to a special lab. This lab doesn't create the simple profile used for CODIS. It generates a much more detailed file, the same kind you'd get if you spit in a tube and sent it to a consumer DNA company like 23andMe or Ancestry. This file contains hundreds of thousands of genetic markers. It's a rich, detailed map of a person's genetic code. The next step is crucial. Investigators can't just walk into Ancestry's private database and start searching. That's not allowed. Instead, they turn to public open-source genealogy websites. The most well-known are GEDmatch and FamilyTree DNA. These are sites where people who have already gotten their DNA tested by a company can voluntarily upload their data. They do this to find more relatives, to trace their heritage, to connect with people who share their DNA. The investigators upload the killer's DNA profile to one of these public sites. They treat the killer's DNA just like any other user, and then they wait for the results. The website's algorithm churns through the data looking for matches. It's not looking for a perfect match. It's looking for relatives. It might spit out a list of people who share enough DNA to be a second cousin, or a third cousin once removed, or great-grannies. This is where the real work begins. It isn't a simple computer search that says the killer is Bob Smith. The computer just gives you a clue. It gives you a name, the name of a distant cousin who decided to research their family tree. Now, a genealogist gets involved. Often these are specialists who work with law enforcement. They take that list of distant relatives and they start building family trees. They use public records, census data, birth certificates, death notices, social media, anything they can find. They build the family tree of the third cousin, then the family tree of the fourth cousin. They work backwards in time, looking for a shared ancestor, a great-great-grandparent, for example, that both of these distant relatives have in common. Once they find that common ancestor, they know the killer must also be a descendant. So they start building the family tree forward again. They trace all the descendants of that great-great-grandparent down to the present day. They look for someone who fits the profile of the suspect. The right age, the right gender. Someone who lived in the area where the crimes happened. This process can take hundreds, even thousands of hours. It's a massive puzzle with missing pieces. Eventually they might narrow it down to a few brothers in one family. Or a single man. This person is not a suspect yet. They are a person of interest. The genealogist hands the name to the police. Then, old-fashioned police work takes over. As detectives start investigating this person. They look into his background, they put him under surveillance, and they wait for him to discard something with his DNA on it. A coffee cup from a trash can, or a cigarette butt. a used napkin. They collect this item and send it to the lab. They test the DNA, and they compare it directly to the DNA from the original crime scene. If it's a match, they have their killer. That's what happened with Joseph D'Angelo. They got his DNA from the door handle of his car, and from a tissue he threw in a trash can. It was a perfect match. The ghost had a face. This process has been a revelation. It has solved cases that were gathering dust for half a century. The success stories are powerful. They feel like justice finally delivered. Take the case of the NorCal Rapist. For 15 years, from 1991 to 2006, he attacked women across Northern California. He was methodical, careful, and terrifying. The police had his DNA, but no matches in the criminal database. The attacks stopped, but the fear didn't. The case was ice cold. Using forensic genealogy, investigators found a distant relative on GEDmatch. They built a family tree and eventually narrowed their focus to Roy Charles Waller, a 58-year-old man working at the University of California, Berkeley. They followed him, got his DNA from a discarded soda cup, and made the arrest. Another ghost, captured. Or think about April Tinsley. In 1988, the 8-year-old girl was abducted and murdered in Fort Wayne, Indiana. For years, the killer taunted the police, leaving chilling notes. The community was heartbroken and terrified. The case remained unsolved for 30 years. In 2018, police used the same genealogical method. They uploaded the killer's DNA and found 2 second cousins. Genealogists worked backwards, found a set of common great-grandparents, and then built the tree forward. They identified 2 brothers as persons of interest. Police zeroed in on one, John Miller. They got his DNA from used condoms he threw in his trash. It was a match. He confessed. After 3 decades of pain, April Tinsley's family had an answer. Forensic genealogy isn't just for finding killers. It's also for giving names back to the nameless. For decades, unidentified bodies have been buried in anonymous graves, their families left to wonder what happened. These are the John and Jane Does of the world. Now, investigators can use DNA from these remains to do the same thing. They can find a distant cousin and rebuild a family tree. One of the first big cases of this was the Buckskin Girl. In 1981, a young woman's body was found in a ditch in Ohio. She was wearing a fringed buckskin jacket. Nobody knew who she was. She was buried under a tombstone that read Jane Doe. For 37 years, she was nameless. Then, in 2018, the DNA Doe Project, a non-profit organization, took on her case. They used forensic genealogy, they built a family tree, and identified her as Marcia King, a 21-year-old from Arkansas. They were able to find her mother, who had spent nearly 4 decades not knowing what happened to her daughter. It didn't solve her murder, but it gave her back her name. It gave her family a piece of peace. So when you hear these stories, it's easy to believe this is the magic bullet, the ultimate crime-fighting tool. It works when CODIS fails because it casts a much, much wider net. CODIS only contains the DNA of about 20 million people, mostly criminals. But consumer DNA companies have the data of over 30 million ordinary citizens. And you don't need the criminal's DNA in the database, you just need one of their relatives. A third cousin is all it takes. Because of how DNA is shared, statisticians have calculated that for a person of Northern European descent, more than 60% of them can be identified through a relative in one of these databases. It's like the whole population has become a giant lineup. For the families of victims, this is everything. For them, a cold case isn't an old file. It's a wound that never heals, it's a birthday that comes every year with no one to celebrate. It's a constant nagging question mark at the center of their lives. Forensic genealogy provides answers. It provides a name, a face, and a chance at justice, even decades later. It can feel like a miracle, but it's not. It's a tool. And like any tool, it has limits, it has major hurdles. The question was, is this the key to solving all cold cases? The honest answer is no. Not even close. There are big practical reasons why it won't work for every case. First, you need DNA. Good DNA. That sounds obvious, but it's a huge problem. In many old cases, the evidence was collected poorly. It was stored improperly. Over the decades, the DNA has degraded. It's broken down. It's like trying to read a book where all the ink has faded. The labs that do the special analysis for genealogy need a good amount of high-quality DNA to build that detailed profile. If you don't have it, the process stops before it can even begin. Sometimes the problem is a mixture. The DNA from the killer is mixed with DNA from the victim, or from other people. Trying to separate those signals to get a clean profile of just the suspect can be impossible. Many cold cases, especially sexual assaults, involve this kind of mixed DNA. So, for a huge number of cases on the shelf, there's simply no usable DNA to start with. No key, no lock. Second, the databases are not a perfect reflection of the world. The whole system depends on the killer having a relative who has taken a DNA test and uploaded it to a public site. What if they don't? Consumer DNA testing is most popular among white Americans of European descent. If the suspect is from an ethnic group that is underrepresented in these databases, the chances of finding a relative drop dramatically. If they are a recent immigrant from a country where these tests aren't common, there might be no family members in the database at all. They become a genetic ghost. This creates a serious issue of inequality. It means this powerful tool works much better for solving crimes where the suspect is of European ancestry. For suspects from African, Asian, or Hispanic backgrounds, the odds of a successful search are much lower. It's a genealogical desert. So, this tool, for all its power, has a built-in bias based on who is and who is not using these DNA services. Third, there's a sheer amount of work and money involved. This is not a cheap or fast process. The lab work to get the detailed DNA profile can cost thousands of dollars. Then you have to pay the genealogists for their time. And these are highly skilled experts. Building a complex family tree from a third cousin match can take 1,000 hours or more. Police departments are already stretched thin. They have limited budgets. They have active cases with fresh leads that need attention right now. Can a small-town police department afford to spend $10,000 in a year of investigators' time on a 40-year-old murder? For many, the answer is no. This creates a resource gap. High-profile cases with a lot of media attention might get the funding. But what about the thousands of other cases? They might stay cold simply because there's no money to pursue the genealogical route. And fourth, there's the problem of human complexity. Family trees are not always neat and tidy. They are often messy. You run into things like endogamy. This is when a population is relatively isolated and people marry within the group for generations. Think of small island communities or certain religious groups. Genetically, everyone starts to look like a cousin. A third cousin might also be a fifth cousin and a seventh cousin in 6 different ways. The family tree isn't a tree anymore, it's a tangled wreath. Trying to trace a single line of descent becomes a nightmare. Then you have all the family secrets, adoptions that were never spoken of, children born from affairs, people who changed their names, sperm donors. All of these things create dead ends or send the genealogist down the wrong path. The DNA might point to a certain family, but the historical records don't match up. The paper trail doesn't align with the genetic trail. These are not rare occurrences. They are a part of the human story, and they can make a genealogical search completely fall apart. So you have the technical limits of the DNA, the demographic limits of the databases, the financial limits of police departments, and the biological complexity of our own families. All of these things put a hard ceiling on how many cold cases this method can actually solve. It's a powerful key, but many doors are simply not designed for it. But the challenges aren't just practical. There's a whole other layer to this. A deep, ethical minefield that we are just beginning to navigate. Now, is this something we should be doing at all? The entire system of forensic genealogy is built on a foundation of broken privacy. Think about it. Millions of people sent their DNA to companies like Ancestry and 23andMe for personal reasons. They wanted to learn about their health. They wanted to find out if they had Irish heritage. They wanted to connect with long-lost relatives. They did not sign up to become a genetic informant against their own family. When a person uploads their DNA to a public site like GeneMatch, they are not just sharing their own genetic code. They are sharing information about their parents, their siblings, their children, their aunts, uncles, and cousins. Everyone they are related to. A single person's decision to share their DNA can implicate hundreds of other people who never consented to anything. Your second cousin's hobby just made you a potential lead in a murder investigation. This raises huge questions about consent. Can one person consent on behalf of their entire family tree? Law enforcement argues that people have no expectation of privacy in DNA they shed, like on a coffee cup. And they argue that the genealogy databases are public people chose to put their information there. But did they really understand what they were choosing? Did they read the fine print? Did they imagine a detective scrolling through their list of DNA matches? After the Golden State Killer case, the privacy debate exploded. GEDmatch, the site that was used to find him, got scared. They changed their terms of service. Suddenly, users were automatically opted out of law enforcement searches. An officer could only see a user's DNA if that user specifically logged in and opted in. The result? The number of DNA profiles available to police on that site plummeted by over 85% overnight. And it was a clear sign that many people were not comfortable with this. Family tree DNA also allows police searches, but only for violent crimes, and users can opt out. This shows the tension. Everyone wants to see cold cases solved, but no one wants to feel like their family's genetic blueprint is sitting in a police file. Then there is the risk of error. What if the genealogist gets it wrong? They are human. They are working with incomplete records. They might follow the wrong branch of a family tree. This could lead police to target a completely innocent person. Imagine being that person. The police start asking your neighbors about you. They follow you. They dig through your trash. They might even get a warrant and show up at your door. Even if you are cleared by a direct DNA test later, the damage is done. Your name is associated with a horrific crime. Your life is turned upside down. This nearly happened. In one case, investigators wrongly focused on a New Orleans filmmaker based on a faulty genealogical link. He was put under surveillance and had his DNA secretly collected before he was eventually cleared. It shows that the process is not foolproof. A mistake can have devastating consequences for an innocent person. We are in a new world here. The laws have not caught up to the technology. There is very little regulation or oversight. Who decides which cases get to use this powerful, invasive technique? Only murder. What about assaults? What about property crimes? What if an authoritarian government wants to use it to track down political dissidents by using their relatives' DNA? The possibilities are chilling. We are being forced to decide, as a society, where the line is. How much privacy are we willing to give up for the sake of security and justice? Is it okay to turn entire families into a pool of potential suspects to catch one bad guy? There are no easy answers. A victim's family will say, do whatever it takes. A privacy advocate will say, this is a step too far. They are both right in their own way. So, where does that leave us? Forensic genealogy is not the master key to all cold cases. It's not going to empty out the evidence lockers. It has real hard limits. You need good DNA. The suspect needs to have a relative in the right database. The police department needs the money and expertise to do the work. The family tree needs to be traceable. If any of those things are missing, the key won't turn. But what it is a new hope. It is arguably the most important breakthrough in forensic science since the discovery of DNA fingerprinting itself. It has already solved dozens of the most difficult, heartbreaking cases imaginable. It has given names to the dead and justice to the forgotten. It has proven that for some cases, there is no such thing as too cold. The future will be a balancing act. The technology will get better. Labs will get better at working with smaller degraded DNA samples. The databases will continue to grow, making it harder for anyone to remain a genetic ghost. More cases will be solved. But the ethical debate will also grow louder. We will have to create rules and laws to govern this powerful new capability. We will have to decide what is fair, what is right, and what crosses the line. It's a complicated picture. Forensic genealogy is not a simple solution. It's a complex, expensive, ethically fraught tool that works only under specific circumstances. But when it does work, it changes everything. It's not the key to solving all cold cases. But for a victim's family who has waited 30 years for an answer, it can be the only key that matters. It can be the one key that finally brings their long nightmare to an end. And for them, that's more than enough.